Welcome to City Conversations. Today with me I have Chief Ben Major, who is our fire chief, and Scott Bullard, who is our emergency management and safety officer. We're here to talk to you a little bit about what we do, what they do from a fire and emergency services perspective to help keep our residents safe. It's certainly a topic on a lot of people's minds as we move forward, and considering too that about 50% of our budget from the city's perspective comes from both fire and police. And so a large part of what we do to keep our residents safe really falls on these two gentlemen here and what they do to keep our residents safe. So thank you, Chief and Scott, for being here today. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you for having us.
So let's talk about, Chief, what the mission of the fire department is. I think most people know that, but really hearing it from you, what you do, what it's all about?
Basically, it's to protect life, property, and the environment. And we do that through what I call the 3 E's: code enforcement, education, and emergency response.
Okay, that's a pretty concise mission and certainly a valuable one. How many folks, how many firefighters do you have and support staff to make all of that happen?
At full strength, we're at 331 personnel. Of course, we do have vacancies from time to time, so we are permitted to overhire to fill those vacancies.
That's a lot of people serving a huge community. So just over 300 people to serve 210,000 residents. How many fire stations do you have them split up out across the city?
Currently, we have 17 stations strategically located throughout the city.
And I know you time the locations and plan the locations. You said strategically because you've got to figure out where they go and how they fit into the big city map perspective. So that they're
correct. We're always looking at response times, call volume, population shifts, and trends to determine the best fit for a station, or to relocate a station, or even build a new station.
And I understand too, so you've got a little over 300 folks here, but you're always looking to get more, and I think we're in the middle of a fire academy going on right now. Tell me a little bit about what's involved with how you would train a potential new recruit.
Well, we run an academy. We'll go through our recruitment process, and we actually recruit all year long. But once we establish an eligibility list, we run an academy. We started the academy back in June of this year, early June. So we currently have one underway. But throughout the academy, of course, you see we do PT training, physical training, because it's important that we are capable, physically capable, and able to perform our duties to accomplish our mission. But through the course of the academy, they will acquire all of the required certifications that needed to operate as a firefighter in the state of North Carolina.
And how long did you say this academy lasts?
17 weeks.
17 weeks, that's pretty intense.
It is. A lot of work goes into it.
And do the majority of the folks who start make it through?
The majority do make it through. Every once in a while, we may lose a person in an academy, but for the most part, it's well over 90% success rate.
And that's once they get through some initial screening, I guess you've got going on to determine if they're fully qualified to be a part of that process.
Exactly.
So you've done a little bit of culling out, if you will, to make sure that you've got the right caliber candidate before they get to that physical training piece.
Exactly.
That's some pretty intense things we're looking at here in terms of, is this over at the Academy Training Center where this is taking place?
It is at our training facility. We actually have a drill tower, which includes burn rooms, and you're looking at a fire, a training fire in one of the burn rooms. We no longer go into the community and burn donated houses because of environmental concerns.
What's some of the biggest challenges you find with the recruits as they go through? What's the toughest thing for them to do?
Well, there's a couple of things. I start out at the front end, just recruitment. We're not as diverse as we would like to be as an organization, so recruiting for diversity is always a challenge, but also getting the best fit person for the job. Some people are strong in different areas and in different capacities, but the basics, they got to be physically capable of completing the job. It is an intense career service. So as I mentioned, the academy is 17 weeks, it's intense. So being able to complete the academy successfully and then enter the workforce and be successful as a Fayetteville firefighter.
Right. And once a year, you said you're recruiting all year long, but these classes take place one time each year.
Well, the process, the hiring process, which may consist of a written test, physical agility test, and interviews. We'll do those components once a year,
Right.
and then hire from that eligibility list all year long.
I see, okay. That's quite a process, and I'm sure pretty intense to keep it from a manpower perspective from your side, to keep all those people moving.
Oh, yes.
And then community outreach, I know, is an important thing. Getting out into our community, sharing with folks what you do, sharing with our residents what you do. So tell me a little bit about what you do to make sure that people interface with you often. Or Scott, if you've got any input on that too, what's behind that, and what do you see as a benefit of doing that?
Well, I like to tell people, you could depend on the fire department. You could depend on us to respond, to arrive, but it is a two-way street. It's a partnership. It's coordination. All of that is a part of protecting our community. We mentioned we have 331 personnel, which seems like a lot, but we're talking about 200,000 citizens that
Right.
we're protecting, and we can't do it alone. So the educational component is to educate people what they can do to encounter less risk, to survive in the event of some type of catastrophe or some type of emergency event, to help us help them. We're going to arrive on the scene, but we would much rather, if it's a fire, arrive on the scene and everybody be out of the house, and our only concern is extinguishing the fire,
Right.
as opposed to rescuing
Sure.
someone.
And what methods do you use? Do you have events that you plan to get out in the community, or how do you interface with them? I know that the firehouses are located in neighborhoods, and so typically it's around places where people live that are right next door, but what methods do you have that actually gets you out to that community?
Well, we schedule a lot of events, and some are by request. We participate in requested events, but we'll host a safety day. Our biggest event every fall is a safety day that we'll hold near the Cross Creek Mall or at the Cross Creek Mall, and we get the opportunity to display some of our equipment, resources, and show some of our operations, and just a chance to educate the public what we do, even opportunities for them as career choices, and how they can help us help the community.
Well, that's good. It's certainly got a lot of benefits there, both in the short term and the long term, as you look to do what you can to educate them for personal reasons, but again, to your point, moving forward from a recruitment perspective, it certainly helps plant that seed in somebody's mind in terms of if they ever wanted to become a firefighter, how they could do that. I know exciting times for us. We've recently opened Fire Station 12, which is huge. And certainly, I know that's a big thing for you. That's been going on for what, the last year?
Yeah,
The construction for
about
that?
a year.
Yeah.
So we were excited to get into that station and start operations out of that station.
And what prompted the necessity of redoing Fire Station 12 over off of Hope Mills Road?
Fire Station 12 replaces the old station, which was close to a 60-year-old station. The station, by the design and the opportunities out of that station, didn't meet our operational needs. And we had an opportunity to relocate it a little further down to help us in our response times going towards the southern border of the city. So all those things come into play. And like I said, it was just an exciting time, an opportunity also to partnership with J.W. Coon Elementary School. So it was a partnership between the city and the Cumberland County school system.
That's a great point, because they donated the land, right? So
Yes,
it's actually
they
part
did
of the
donate the
school's
land, and we built the station.
Yeah, I know the kids were really excited about that. And
They-
it was great to see them at the ceremony and certainly be a part of that event.
They are, and just to establish that relationship with the school and partnership with the school. Now we want to be the best neighbors we can be, and the gym it's an opportunity to educate young future leaders in the city.
Absolutely. Oh, they see that right behind them there, and so it's right there with them. What a beautiful station, as we had the opportunity to walk through. I know while it was being built and even after it opened, but going inside the door here and seeing the inside facilities. I think, is this the part where the bedrooms or the sleeping quarters are at?
That's the entry, that's the foyer, and to the right you have the radio room right there, the radio room where We do reports and help citizens walking in. Offices down the hallway, but through the door straight ahead is the dormitory area. That room there is a training/community room. So there's opportunity for the community to come to hold meetings and different events there as well.
Well, that's very helpful. Yeah, and as people don't realize as you look at the fact that there's the kitchen, what a beautiful kitchen.
It is.
That your
Great
firefighters,
kitchen.
when they come in, talk a little bit about how long they stay there for. Why would they need a kitchen like that, and would they need a dormitory area to sleep?
We have to provide 24-hour protection 365 days a year. So someone will always be at the station in the event of any type of catastrophe. With that said, we eat there. We have dormitories because staff sleeps there. Everybody, we work 24-hour shifts. Actually, it's 24 hours and 15 minutes. There's a 15-minute overlap for our morning briefings. You know, we did this yesterday, or this is coming up today.
Right.
So they pass information back and forth. But the goal is to provide 24-hour coverage. So
Yeah, I don't think people think about that. I mean, that's really their home away from home. They're living there a day every time they work for 24 plus hours, as you said. And so being able to be comfortable in that time frame, making sure that they get the rest they need, that they're properly prepared to go out is very important.
It is.
I remember going through the old fire station 12 quite some time ago, and boy, what a difference. What a difference. So, and are there any other fire stations on the horizon that we're looking at doing here in the near future? I know you're always looking ahead.
We have identified some needs, future needs, and where either it's a relocation of a station or to renovate a station or build a new station. But it's got to be part of the city's capital improvement plan because there's a lot of departments with needs. And in fairness, everybody has to get their share of the budget. Sure. And help meet their needs.
But you got a lot of places to maintain. Tell me again, how many is it?
17.
17? So 17 fire stations. That's a lot of fire stations across the city.
Yes.
And again, making sure they're properly outfitted and able to accommodate our firefighters so that they can do their job and do it right. Service calls is another area I know you respond to all the time. And so when you say, it used to be the fire department, right? So now it's fire and emergency management because, well, you tell me why. Why is it the other part of that in your title?
Well, we have become more of a all-risk, all-hazards response type agency. People would be surprised to know that less than 4% of our call volume are actually fires. The majority are emergency medical calls and specialized rescue, whether it's hazardous materials release or technical rescue or some other type activity. You are going to see us on the scene.
Right.
Our bread and butter, so to speak, what we chartered to do is protect the city from fire, but we have, like I said, a lot more medical calls and other type calls than actual fires.
Right. And so we see a little bit on there, there's an accident right there. So when an accident happens, fire trucks have to respond to every accident that happens, is that right? How does that work?
Well, I wouldn't say every. If there's an injury or suspected injury, we will respond. We mentioned we have 17 strategically located stations, so we're more likely to have a shorter response time to the incident than the ambulance service, who are mobile throughout the city. But all of our personnel from the rank of captain down are required to be certified as emergency medical technicians through the state. Which makes sense because, like I said, the bulk of our calls, about 75% are medical calls.
Right. So the ones that are fire, though, tell me about which fires you have most often. I know the answer to this because you guys taught it to me. But what's the fire that happens most often, and how preventable is it?
Actually, cooking fires, or I should say unattended cooking fires, is our biggest challenge. And actually, at one time, most people would think it's adults always, but even with children coming in at 3:30 or after school, and both parents working, they fend for themselves. They put something on the stove, get distracted. Result is a kitchen fire, which can bloom into a full-fledged structural fire. Right. But also adults, the same issue. Getting distracted, we're always busy through life. You know, just taking care of things, so we'll start one activity and get distracted, and next thing you know, 911, you're calling the fire department because of a cooking fire.
Well, that's good for people to know. Don't leave your stoves unattended.
Correct.
You're going to cook, make sure you cook. You're doing other things with your phone or games or whatever. Make sure you're focusing on what your task at hand is, which is cooking. Now, how helpful is it to have fire extinguishers handy, smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, any detectors that help you identify these?
That's your first defense. You have to understand that you have an issue. So a detector or a smoke detector will alert you that, hey, there's an issue, there's smoke. Most fires will start small, so just a small amount of smoke will activate the detector. And then this is where the educational component comes in. If we can educate our citizens, make sure you have a working smoke detector first of all, but understand what you do in the event it activates. That's the difference between having a full-fledged house fire or just a little pot on the stove burning.
Right.
And whether you can handle it yourself with a fire extinguisher or get everyone out of the house and let us come extinguish it if it's something bigger than that. But it all starts with that early notification.
Right. And how soon after somebody recognizes they have a fire do you want people to call 911? If you think you can handle it yourself, do you just go, oh, I've got it? Or do you recommend immediately getting on the phone while you're trying to figure that out to notify 911 that something's going down?
Immediately notify 911. Don't put yourself at risk. If you are trained and feel you can handle a small fire, that's a decision you have to make, but always contact 911. Even if you think you've extinguished the fire, let us come in, we'll check it. A fire can get into the hidden spaces between the walls, into the cabinets, into your ductwork, and while you think you have extinguished the fire, it goes from bad to worse, and,
sure.
and here we come anyway. So always call 911, we'll come out, there's no charge for the call, that's what we do, right. And we'll make sure that the fire has been extinguished.
And I'm not sure if there's such thing as an average response time, but is there, and how long do you usually, are you usually able to get to a residence once they're notified?
Well, our benchmark, and when we say response times, there's a few things that goes into that, which is why education and partnerships are important. We do nothing without being notified. Right. So someone has to call 911, and there's a call processing time component. Then there's a dispatch component, and then travel time. The travel time, our benchmark is we want to be at any location in 5 minutes and 12 seconds.
Wow.
And that's pretty quick.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Very quick.
Whether it's a medical call, fire call, it's pretty quick. But the things we don't control is call processing time and the notification time. So you asked about dialing 911. If it takes you 4 minutes because you thought you could put the fire out, and you may have put the fire out, but if it takes 4 or 5 minutes, and then you understand that you didn't, just in travel time, it's 5 minutes plus 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Now we're already up to 10 minutes just right. Just to get on the scene.
Sure.
So, but on the average, if you want to say average, we strive for a travel time of 5 minutes and 12 seconds.
That's pretty quick. When you think about that, and again, it's something I really didn't think about until coming to the city and having the opportunity to work with and listen to folks like yourselves. You know, 5 minutes and 12 seconds to get anywhere in the city goes back to the strategy of how do you place 17 fire stations around the city so that you can maximize that. And that's what I'd like, our viewers to understand, is that that's something that we really look closely at. You really look closely at, and there is a very deliberate process in place to make sure that a station is at the right location that allows you and your firefighters to get to the houses as quick as they possibly can. And as large as the city of Fayetteville is, that's a pretty admirable task to be able to do that. Scott, we haven't talked yet about hurricane preparedness, and the season is coming upon us, and one of the reasons we brought you here today was to share a little bit about that. I think actually we're in the middle of hurricane season now, but the big part's coming. Tell us a little bit about what we can do to prepare as hurricanes come towards us.
Absolutely, Kevin. We ask that the citizens do 3 major things. One is to get a kit. The second part is to make a plan and then to stay informed. Well, the kit process is the 72-hour kit we're talking about, where you have at least a gallon of water per person per day. that you can either put in that kit or put on the shelf for when something strikes, such as a hurricane. You also need your medications. You need some sort of food that's shelf stable. And if you use canned food, obviously a can opener, the manual kind. I know everybody loves the electrics, but you need to be able to get into it when you need it. There are all sorts of products now that are in packaging that don't have to be heated or that will self-heat, that can sustain you for that 3-day period. We also ask that people look after their pets. They need to have their food and needs prepared for that 3-day window as well. In terms of a plan, what we're asking is to have a way to contact those relatives and people that might be concerned about you, as well as looking around your neighborhood and kind of having your nose a little bit in everybody's business as far as accounting for your neighbors who are away. We have military folks in our community that might be deployed. We need to keep track of each other so that they're leading up to the third thing, being informed. And being informed has a great many different avenues now. We have a City of Fayetteville app that can help keep you informed. The state has Ready NC, which is an app that is like a clearinghouse of information to help with that informational process. And one thing that we beg people to do is register for Cumberland Alerts off the county's webpage, simply because that offers you the mass notification information we might need to pass on to you. Whether it's protective actions we want you to take or whether we want you to stay in place. It's information that's timely and you really need to know it critically.
These both existed during Hurricane Matthew, is that right? Cumberland Alerts, I think we had already transitioned to that.
Yeah, there was another vendor, but it was still a mass notification system.
That's right, it was Code Red, I think was the old one.
The struggle with those systems, though, they require subscribers. You can buy a phone list, a prepackaged canned list, but some numbers in it are out of date or dead or disconnected or what have you, and you don't always get 100% coverage.
Sure. Well, that's a good point, and so really goes back to Cumberland Alerts and Ready.gov. Was it Ready.gov or NC?
Ready.gov is on the
Ready.gov.
federal level, which
The
FEMA
federal
has
level.
an app as
Right.
well. The North Carolina one, Ready NC one,
Ready
is
NC.
tailored to our
Okay.
state and our particular area.
So Ready NC and Cumberland Alerts, which I know we can find on the Cumberland County website for subscriptions there with Cumberland Alerts. And then you mentioned the city app too, which we've had out now for several months. But to your point, that was one of the benefits when we got that app that we were very excited about. So we're currently at 1,000, 1,500 subscribers on the city app. And so those 1,000 to 1,500 people, next time we have a major calamity or event come through here, like a hurricane, which I'm sure will come through here at some point again, we have the ability to reach out very quickly and connect with people and tell them about power outages or be prepared for closed roads or whatever the emergency might be, because we're intricately tied with you guys. We're in the Emergency Operations Center from a communications perspective. We track what's going on. So great point. And so those are only effective if you subscribe. And so really that's
Absolutely.
what we need people to do is sign up for one of those three platforms, whether it's Cumberland Alerts, Ready NC, or the city app. But boy, if you had all three, you'd be covered.
Yeah, do all three. And we don't quantify and we don't pat our citizens on the back for some of the social media push that they accomplish. That helps us with our mission as well. We find that difficult to even measure, but it helps because it's getting the word out.
That's a good point. It's a very good point. I know we saw that during Hurricane Matthew where people were posting information, as were we, but people were posting information well. And I know another thing we want to bring up, one of the great, or one of the good films that we got during Hurricane Matthew was the idea of turn around, don't drown. So when you see a bunch of water where it shouldn't be, which is in the middle of a road, which is in a spot you don't expect, and think that your car or your truck is high enough off of the ground to get through, don't do what these people here did, which is try and drive through it.
Absolutely. Flooding is the killer, the #1 killer. And the only way to combat that is to not become part of the problem if you can help it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this picture here, this is downtown Fayetteville. We happened to capture this. Gavin McRoberts, one of our Faye-TV public information specialists, was downtown, just out walking with his camera and caught this on tape. Actually got picked up by several national news outlets. But here we see our fire department from New York who came down to help us doing what you call a swiftwater rescue?
Swiftwater rescue, yes.
And so, yeah, bad place to be on top of your vehicle, but fortunately the fire department was there to save him. And I'm sure that was 3 lives or 4 lives saved right there. But the best thing you can do when you get to a spot like that is do what?
turn around and don't drown and
There you
avoid
go.
the hazard altogether.
Absolutely. So you got a big truck and think it's going to get through? Probably not a good idea.
Not at all.
Don't test it. That water is moving fast. And so it was good in this particular case that these people were saved. Which really moves into one of our final areas. Let's talk a little bit about special operations and the special areas you all have. I learned that during our last Citizens Academy, where I got to watch some of your hazmat specialists in action, your USAR team. Tell me what USAR stands for.
USAR stands for Urban Search and Rescue, but it doesn't negate the fact that we have a rescue service that we provide, a technical rescue service within the department. We have 2 fire stations, Fire Station 14 by Fayetteville State University and Fire Station 11 off Rayford Road on the western side of town, that we internally designate as rescue stations simply because the trained manpower and equipment reside there. That's the only thing magical about the location. But they provide technical rescue services day to day to all of our citizens, whether it's an automobile accident that they mitigate with someone needing to be extricated or that might be entrapped in a car or a truck, all the way up to things that are a little bit more infrequent but nevertheless dangerous, like confined space or a trench collapse or something requiring rope rescue.
Where we see this, well, we just saw it a minute ago, and I think it's coming up again, that robot going in to drag somebody out. So we've got some pretty incredible tools, some assets that
We do.
that you all have to help keep people safe.
We do, and our hazardous materials team is kind of configured around the same architecture. They reside primarily with personnel and equipment at Station 1 downtown that many people are familiar with, and Station 17 off Bailey Lake Road. Again, nothing magical about the locations other than that's where they respond from. But collectively, there's an umbrella for special operations. And the 2 teams, if you want to call them that, intermix, because sometimes the skill sets have to be used together. For instance, the confined space environment, it could be an oxygen deficient environment or a flammable environment that you have hazmat expertise side by side with rescue. The so-called USAR team that we talk about is modeled after a federal concept that was developed in the late 80s. And there are actually, if you take the federal model, 7 pieces that are not always apparent when you look at them. You have a medical piece, you have a planning piece, and a logistical piece. And our military listeners can very easily identify with, just because you have boots on the ground, there's a huge sustainment force behind the actual folks doing the work. And within that piece, there's also a search and rescue piece, which sometimes is subdivided into 2. And you also have the means by which, like I said, from a sustainment point, to actually move those resources and people that might contribute hazmat expertise. You could have some hazmat team members actually on that rescue team.
And we still see some pictures of our hazmat folks here in action. And I think it was interesting too, you had told me offline before, as we were preparing for this show, that our teams not only respond to emergencies here, but you're on call for other areas. Talk about how that works. For instance, we saw the fire department for New York coming down to help us.
Right.
We do the same thing back.
We operate in a statewide mutual aid environment that's not only limited to the borders of our county. We can help our neighboring counties. Or in the case of our hazmat team, they have a contract to come to the aid in a regional fashion with the state. There are 7 regions. But that doesn't negate the fact that you might not necessarily be called next door. You could be called all the way across the state, the way it's constructed. Rescue is kind of being pushed towards that model. It's not totally in place yet because it's a little younger. The hazmat piece has been in place since the mid-90s. The rescue piece around 2002 or so, and there's been some shuffling of assets. There were once a great deal of teams, more than a dozen. Now they're kind of shuffling it down to about 7. So there's 7 hazmat programs, so they kind of align, not necessarily the same players perfectly, but it's a manageable number.
Sure.
And there's a lot of money and expertise involved in being able to maintain those programs.
Absolutely.
They're just not on every corner.
Right. Yeah, the specialties that each of these folks have that work in this field is just amazing, and it's really something I've gained a deep appreciation for in the time that I've been here and talking with you in the city over the last several years. You know, we've set a new record today. We've just gone over the 30-minute mark for our show, which Sherry tells me is not a good thing. So we're gonna wrap up here. But interesting in a sense that we could probably talk easily for another 30 minutes just on the topic of urban search and rescue or on the hazmat team itself. But I think if nothing else, I would hope that people take away from here the professionalism, the training, the dedication that's required to go into the field that you all are in. It's just amazing. And I don't know that people think about that sometimes. So hopefully as they walk away from watching us today, they have a deeper appreciation for what takes place to keep our residents safe. It is certainly a huge commitment on your side and all of the firefighters who serve the city of Fayetteville, and we appreciate what you do. And so I really just appreciate the time you've taken to share with me today what you do. And I hope our viewers the same. So thank you very much for being here today, Chief and Scott. I appreciate you taking the time to come on to the show, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see another fire station here built in the next year or two or three. But as you said, we got a plan for that and make sure we budget for it. But certainly keeping our folks, our firefighters in great equipment and in being able to serve our residents and making sure we keep them safe. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for joining us today on City Conversations.